and welcome to a documentary about refugees and migrants. Today, we'll discuss the aforementioned topic of migrants and refugees. This will be followed by an interview with a law professor and some tips on how to help migrants and refugees, and how refugees can seek help. According to a UNHCR study, a total of 170.3 million people fled in 2023. This included 67.1 million internally displaced persons, 37.4 million refugees under UN protection, 6.9 million asylum seekers, and another 5.8 million people in need of protection. Conflict, violence, breaches of human rights, persecution on the basis of political or identity views, and major disturbances of public order are the primary causes of refugee movement. Approximately 46.2 million refugees have fled Ukraine to one of its neighboring countries since the start of the conflict. Furthermore, over 40.3 million people have entered Ukraine through the border. There are over 6.3 million Ukrainian refugees officially registered in Europe. Germany and Poland have taken in more refugees than any other EU nation. Since 2013, Syria has been the country with the highest number of asylum seekers in the EU. In 2022, 135,465 applications were submitted by people from Syria.
The beauty of the European mindset is that people have the right to express themselves, and that is a rare opportunity. To think that from China to Russia to the Middle East, many people don't have the right to even say a word against what their leaders say is frightening. But in the EU, we should protect that. We should protect the European free mindset, the mindset which acknowledges human rights. An answer like that I was given by Mr. Stephen Clark, Director of the European Parliament Liaison Office at the European Parliament. And even though it wasn't directly addressed to my question, Mr. Andrei Kovachev, MEP and ex-Quaestor of the AEP, said that, quote, illegal immigrants should be put on planes and sent to where they came from, Morocco, Tunisia, etc. End quote. I'm really thankful though that I got to hear it. The amount of politics really interests me. It's a refugee crisis. So I'm really encouraged when I see representatives and MEPs talk about it. To learn what a regular European teacher thinks about the whole thing. I'll give it over to my colleague Martina. Martina, it's your turn.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on with our interview. Our interview partner is a law and English teacher at an Austrian school. Let's hear what she has to say about migrants and refugees. When did you become interested in the topic migrants and refugees?
When I was working for the refugee agency and giving advice to refugees.
How do you define a migrant and a refugee, and what are the main legal distinctions between them?
Well, refugees are people who are forced to flee their home country because of some kind of, because they are persecuted by the government. And a migrant is somebody who voluntarily leaves his country for economic reasons, basically.
What are the key factors driving global migration and refugee flows in recent years?
Well, when it comes to migration, I think this is kind of global inequality when it comes to economic differences between poor countries and developed countries. And when it comes to refugees, I think conflicts are getting worse and worse due to limitations in resources and conflicts, political conflicts that we're not addressing. And also the climate change is kind of aggravating the situation for migrants, as for refugees. Yeah.
Why do people leave their home countries and migrate to new places?
Well, I think everybody wants to have a better life for him or herself with the children, and that's basically just a way to try to participate in the wealth of global wealth for people who are from regions where it's just impossible, where you don't have a chance because you're born there. It's just fair for them to try, in my opinion.
What are the main challenges that refugees face when they first arrive in a new country?
Well, there's this kind of culture shock, or like adapting to a new culture. We all know this kind of feeling when you come to a country, you travel to a country, and you don't know anything about the customs or how to behave. And this is kind of worsened because usually you don't speak the language, you're expected to fit in right away. So just as dealing with the new situation, having no friends and family to support you, being on your own and having to adapt.
What do refugees usually need the most when they arrive in a new country?
I would say what they need most is understanding and support, because most, if you're a refugee, it means that you have been persecuted by a government, you might have been tortured, you might have been experiencing war and violence. And so the first thing is just understanding and support. I think they also need the psychological support to deal with what they have been through, also during their journey to Europe, where they had to face all kinds of atrocities, basically.
How do refugee camps work and what support do people get there?
Well, I've been to refugee like places where people live in Austria, like refugee centers, and what I noticed is they are pretty isolated. There was somewhere in the countryside. It's from Vienna. It was like in Burgenland, so they were somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And usually it was like people making money from them because they would have been bankrupt otherwise. Very businesses, old kind of place where people used to stay in the countryside that would not be able to survive without the money for the refugees. Even old brothels, which is also something that's very problematic in my opinion. So we should have invest more in those kind of camps. And it's even worse if it's not in Europe. If it's in Greece, some on an island, there's no kind of support or anything.
Is there something else important each one of us should know about?
I think the most important things are distinguish between these people who are voluntarily coming because they want a better life and real refugees because those are people in need, and we should really help them instead of just judge them based on where they're from. This is kind of the main distinction because people mix those terms up and there's a legal difference. And if you are a refugee, you have the right to asylum.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It can often be difficult to help someone if you don't know how the person feels, what they've been through, and how you can even help them. Here are some tips on how you can help a migrant or a refugee. Number 1. Having an open ear. When you arrive in a new country, you often feel insecure and misunderstood. That's why it's important to communicate with them. Number 2. Offer language courses. When you arrive in a new country without knowing the language, it can be very overwhelming to find a connection. Offering language courses can simplify the situation. And last but not least, number 3, making friends. Becoming friends with people can be a wonderful experience. On the one hand, you get to know the other person's culture. On the other hand, you help them integrate. Before the documentary comes to an end, we would like to show which organizations are committed to helping refugees. Refugee Council, UN Refugee Council, which is provided by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and European Union Agency for Asylum.